Thank you very much, Finn. Good morning, all. It is indeed a great honor to be here and to speak to you. And since we're going to talk about insights, I thought I'll start with an insight about myself. And for that, I'll go back to my early childhood years, which, as you know, is usually a fertile ground for insights into who you are and why you do what you do. So I come from a very big family of 11 children. And that's important because as my business partner and dear friend Mark once told me, that he joined a Leadership in Action, a high potential class in Unilever when he used to work there. And there were 26 people in the class. And at some stage the trainer asked, so of the 26, guys, the firstborn, would you please raise your hand? 24 hands went up. 24 out of 26. And that's not a coincidence. Because indeed, scientific study shows that firstborns are more successful in life than their younger peers. Unfortunately, I'm the 9th of 11. So anyway, that was about me. Let's now talk Insights 2020, and I'll start with just showing you a short video that was basically the briefing of this whole initiative.
We're living in exciting times. Globalization, urbanization, new economies, and new technologies are driving huge business and marketing changes. The technology is empowering consumers, more informed, expecting transparency, demanding accountability, and challenging growth. Growing amounts of data, yet often lacking true insights. Today's insights and analytics world is changing at the speed of light, forcing business, marketing, and insights leaders to answer fundamental business questions. Are we truly consumer-centric? What insights do we require to guide our strategy? And how do we organize to win? That's why we created Insights 2020 to identify the drivers of and how to achieve true customer-centric growth.
So, as you see here, and as been mentioned many times this morning, change is happening fast. And I think the most important characteristic of that change is that we now can say that we actually have reached the age and the time in which we can talk about a truly connected society. I mean, as the slide shows, it's estimated that by 2020 there will be 50 billion connected devices. There will be over 200 billion sensor-enabled devices. And that drives change, that drives incredible change. And it means that many of the traditional value drivers no longer cut it. Where, only years ago, a superior distribution network would give you a sustainable competitive advantage, or more or faster access to information would really keep you ahead of your competitors. Now it's really, in this connected society, it's about the customer, about serving better and on more of their actual needs. So customer centricity, everybody talks about it and has been talking about it for a long time, and therefore was the focus of this study. And the first and most important question was, does it actually drive business growth? And through the study, we went deeper into two very specific questions. What are the drivers? What makes companies customer-centric? And how do you actually achieve that customer centricity? And to answer those questions, we created a coalition. And we started with surrounding us with what I can say are absolutely industry and thought leaders. 10 people chaired by Stan's colleague Keith Wheat. And those 10 people kept us sharp throughout the whole process. But next to the advisory board, there were founding partners, of which a very prominent one is our host today, ESOMAR. And in addition to the founding partners, we actually extended the network with many local, mostly publishing partners to strengthen our network, to strengthen our reach to insights professionals, marketing professionals, and general business practitioners. And then we went to work, and we did a lot of work. We did the traditional qualitative and quantitative on a pretty large scale. But in addition, through Christina and her team at LinkedIn, we were given access to their databases, or actually they did the analysis for us, and validate a lot of the points and deepen the insights by analyzing the actual behaviors of the professional communities that we were researching. Also, Jerry Wind, professor at Wharton, gave us access to his expert panel, so we did some crowdsourcing with them. And obviously we had a couple of teams ourselves to make sure, do desk research and make sure that we were not reinventing wheels and build on the significant knowledge and expertise that's already out there. I think the first learning was, what do we actually mean with customer centricity? Over 300 leaders, marketers, insight leaders, business leaders, what they had in common is that they said, well, customer centricity is not so much an activity. It's not about being more friendly to your customers than others. It's actually a strategy that's guided by a clear and compelling brand purpose to deliver better and know more true customer needs, and importantly, to drive growth and commercial value. So that's what we mean when we talk about customer centricity. And before we go into the results of the study, the backbone, let's say the approach we took is that we distinguished overperformers versus underperformers. So we looked at those companies that grow faster than their competitors and those that lag behind. And although that in the research, in the study itself, was a self-reported growth, we had a team of New York University validate that. And the validation, through external objective data sources, taught us that specifically for the top 2 box and the bottom 2 box, people were actually very correct in assessing their own growth versus competitors. And that's not so strange. I mean, if you think about it, if you work at Apple, come on, you're outperforming your peers. And if you work at HTC, you probably know that you're behind. So that concept of overperformance versus underperformance is central to the learnings and the study as we'll present it. And the first question we asked, so in this age of the connected customer, what are the biggest opportunities? And interestingly, there were 4 that clearly stood out. First, we're now finally able to activate our insights across the whole customer journey. Secondly, we now have access to whole new, rich, and very relevant data sources like behavioral data sources, which allow us to now also personalize our offering better than we ever did before, and our ability to link everything we do to our brand purpose. And interestingly so, it were the overperformers who significantly more often mentioned the ability to link everything to their purpose. But it's not all a walk in the park. There are significant challenges. And the first have to do with the internal organization. Silos, bureaucracy, the legacy of structure, functions. But also, yes, we have more data, but how do we make sense of those data? And very importantly, how do we get the right people on board to do so? And also here, clear distinction between over and underperformers. Underperformers are focused, what I personally would call the myth of silo busting. I mean, when you come to think about it, there have been silos. There currently are silos in all the big organizations. And there always will be silos. Probably even more so as specialization is becoming bigger and bigger. I think it's much more about putting a layer of collaboration, a culture of collaboration across those silos. That's the right answer to this. Overperformers are much more worried about making sense of the data, the data overload, and getting the whole brain people, not only the analysts, but also that combine that with creative thinking. So with these opportunities and challenges, what we did is, so if that's what we have to overcome, then how do we do that? And what we found is we put 66 variables in the quantitative study. And out of those 66, there were 10 that clearly stood out and that clearly characterized the overperformance versus the underperformance. And you can put them in 3 different dimensions. The first is the external, is what we offer to our clients, the total experience. The second dimension has to do with the internal, the organization, and creating a culture and an organizational mindset of true obsession with customers and their needs. And the third has to do with the strategic lever that insights analytics can be. So with that, I'm going to pass to Christina, who will talk to us about those 10 drivers and some examples.
Great.
Christina.
Thank you, Frank. So for each of the drivers, I'm going to talk about what we saw overperformers doing compared to underperformers. And I'm going to share a case example so we can kind of start to understand what we can learn from this. And then you'll see the stages of customer-centric growth that we can actually take to get more customer-centric. And I'll start with this total experience, the external-facing dimension. The first driver is purpose-led, and Frank mentioned this previously. We saw that overperformers, and you can see here, 80% in the orange, agree that they're linking everything that they do to a clear brand purpose, more so than the underperformers. They're also basing this purpose on customer need. And Whiskas is a great example of this. They started out with a caring brand purpose, and through an insight where they realized that there's big cat qualities in every little cat, and people enjoy seeing these qualities come out. And they built their whole marketing strategy around that purpose of nurturing nature. They thought about how they developed their product, and then it actually created a social movement. They partnered with the World Wildlife Foundation to save the white tigers in Siberia. So all around this purpose of being very nurturing nature and thinking about that as their brand purpose. The second driver is data-driven customization. We saw overperformers are creating experiences based on data-driven insights. And Allstate, the example that you see here, a US insurance brand, which historically, like other insurers in the category, took a one-size-fits-all approach. And they moved through this customer-centric journey to a full one-to-one approach, leveraging data. And they did this by placing a sensor, a technology, in the automobiles of the folks that they were insuring. And so they could see actual driving behavior. They could tell if you were being very reckless or maybe you forgot to stop at that stop sign. And they leveraged that data to create almost a real-time predictive model, which they then used to customize that approach, to customize the premiums for those customers. So highly customizable and incredibly data-driven. The last driver of creating the total experience is touchpoint consistency. Overperformers are using insights and analytics to drive consistency across all of the marketing channels, across all the customer touchpoints. And Burberry, a quintessential British brand, is known for doing this through their marketing and communications. And they even extended this to their most recent partner, Apple Music, where they're featuring and focusing on British talent, British musicians, but staying true to the Burberry experience and the consistency across those channels. So let's move from the external to the internal. How do you create this culture of customer obsession? And there are 4 drivers that I'll talk to you about in this particular dimension. The first is that customer centricity is embraced by everyone at the company. And this, more than any other driver that we saw through all the 66 variables that Frank mentioned we analyzed, this was the single most important driver of customer-centric growth. Not that everyone just thinks about the customer, they really truly internally are focused on the customer need. And Marriott is an example of this. in terms of not everyone from the bellhop all the way up to the CEO is putting the customer first. They've been leveraging technology to create these customer experiences and really seamlessly aligning with external partners to do that. And they moved in about a matter of 12 months to be one of the most customer-centric brands in the UK. So it has to be embraced by everyone, but it also has to be led from the top. Leadership priority was the next driver. And you can see customer centricity has to be a priority for the leaders. But they're not just talking the talk, they also need to walk the walk. And the results show here that they're also linking incentives to customer-related KPIs. Through our LinkedIn behavioral analysis, we also saw that overperformers are more likely to engage with the customers directly through social media channels. So they're really talking about this idea of the customer need and customer centricity. The example that you see here, Credit Karma, which is a US Silicon Valley startup that really, truly focuses on helping the consumers, helping customers understand financial management, which is an incredibly complex and challenging thing to do. And they've done this extremely well by really focusing on helping customers, and that's been led from the top, from the CEO. And they've had great success doing that, having now more than 40 million subscribers. So the last two dimensions of creating this customer obsession are really about the culture. Collaboration, and it's not just collaborating internally across functions and departments, it's collaborating with your customers. And we saw that GoPro, as an example, they're really doing this by helping share photographs and getting their customers to really share their experiences, co-creating with them and collaborating with their customers. And the last dimension as part of this internal culture is experimentation. Overperformers are more likely to embrace risk, not just manage risk. And I'll use LinkedIn, a personal example, where we really embrace a culture of taking intelligent risks, and everyone at the company really is empowered to do this. It helps us innovate faster, make faster decisions, and we're not afraid to fail. We try it, we move quickly. Stan mentioned this in some of the concepts with Unilever. You have to do this to grow quickly and to move fast. And so we're all empowered to take these intelligent risks. I'll move into the last dimension, which is the role of insights and analytics, which I know this room is particularly caring about. So it starts with the leading role of I&A. We saw overperformers have insights and analytics teams that are leading the business. And Stan talked about some of his experiences at Unilever, really driving strategy. We also saw that insights and analytics reporting into the CEO is something that distinguishes overperformers from underperformers. And Harish Bath, who works at Tata and is also one of the advisory board members for Insights2020, is an example of this. I think this customer journey that you see here fits in perfectly with how Stan closed the previous session. This ability for insights and analytics to inspire, to challenge, and then ultimately to lead the business forward. The next driver is really taking some of this big data and unlocking the power of that insight. And overperformers are more often than underperformers linking data to different data sources to instill these insights. And I'll share an example, a LinkedIn-specific example. Our mission is really to help our members be more productive and successful. And by doing this, we are looking to build the economic graph, digitally map the world's economy to connect talent to opportunity at massive scale. And the example of this that I'll share is the city of Manchester in England came to us with a challenge. They knew that they needed to advance the skills of their workforce and that they needed to do this in order to grow the economy. And so we looked at LinkedIn data, helped them understand what were the current skills, what were the skills that were needed for new jobs, what was the difference between the two, and what were some of the most in-demand jobs out there. And so by doing this, the city of Manchester was able to engage in training. They were able to coach people, help them really gather these skills that were needed to get these jobs, and ultimately helping to close this skills gap. So thinking more forward-looking and predictive with that data. And that's a really nice segue to the last driver, critical capabilities. We saw overperformers and their insights and analytics teams are more likely to be thinking about the business. They're using whole brain thinking. They're creatively problem solving. And they're also using the insights to tell a story. And Mondelez is the example I'll use here. Their insights and analytics has already undergone a transformation where they're already starting to train their team to really think about these skills for the future. So I've talked about the 10 drivers, starting with the total experience, being purpose-led in your brand positioning, using data to create more personalized experiences, but keeping that touch point consistency across your channels, and then moving into creating the culture of customer obsession, from having everyone embrace this, to the leadership making it a priority, to experimenting and collaborating. And then finally, the role of insights and analytics, leading the business, unlocking the power of data to tell that one specific and unique insight that's needed to move the business forward. And then looking at the critical capabilities to embrace this idea of whole brain thinking with future insights and analytics folks.
The nice thing of the size of this study is that it allows us to do pretty deep analysis. And for that, or with that, we created a scorecard for 10 drivers, the 10 drivers that stand out and that contribute to business growth, customer-centric business growth. We look at the scores in the benchmark, and almost 40 large companies participated and shared this, sent a link to this questionnaire in their own companies. And what it allows them to do is to benchmark themselves versus the average or the best in class or of a specific industry or of a specific region. And then the interesting thing is, based on those scores and based on what you know about your own company, you can set an ambition and say, well, if we move the needle on driver X by Y%, and we do that for all drivers, what this database allows us is to model that into what the potential unlock in terms of business growth is. And that is so important because all of a sudden, driving customer centricity is no longer, something that you outsource to insights and analytics folk or to the marketing people, but it's actually really a C-suite discussion. Your CFO wants to see, as we say, listen, if we achieve growth by X% in the following areas, that can potentially unlock so much business growth for us. And I think that changes the whole nature of the conversation around customer centricity for people like the CEO, the CFO. So those are things we can do, but before we end, I want to share a couple of thoughts on the things that I think, based on this learning, we should start doing tomorrow. First of all, and Stan actually referred to that, and I don't know if you picked it up, but I think it's an extremely important point. We tend to look at our offer and the customer that buys that offer and then consumes that offer. But I think what you see when you look through the distance, through all the data, is what overperformers fundamentally do different is that they always contextualize. They see the consumption or the buying or the storing of whatever the product is they sell. They always see that in the context of the total customer experience journey. I think that is an incredible, powerful way to look and to connect better to customers in overall. Another, and my first years I spent in research, and I can so much relate to the feeling of, you want to give, the correct answer based on all the data. And I think what we heard is, with all this change, what you clearly see overperformers do, they, 80 or 90% is enough if it means that you can put it into action. So a brutal focus on action rather than completeness or 100% detail of all the data is something that I think we should all adopt now. And the third is about, a lot of research is used to manage risks, to make sure we don't make the wrong, don't set the wrong, don't go in the wrong direction. But I think it's all about experimentation, and we heard a lot about it. And interestingly, Christina used LinkedIn as an example. And when I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, listen, we're doing this Insights 2020 study. Would you be interested to join? She immediately said yes. I said, but listen, there's also a serious budget and resources involved. She said, yes, I really think this is a very important initiative. But I said, shouldn't I call your boss then? Or should we talk to the CMO? Or she says, no. And we're really empowered. If we see something that's good, we can just immediately act on it. And I think that's a testament to the experiential or the experimental nature of the culture at LinkedIn. And I think the last recommendation, and here I'll use the words of Laurent Flores, the president of ESOMAR. He said, and I don't know if I fully agree with him, but he said to me, looking at focus group through a one-sided mirror is like looking at fish in an aquarium. And whether that's completely true, I think there's a lot of insights you can still distill from focus groups. But you can also just put people in a circle and share stories with them. But I think my bigger point is, go out, engage with customers, talk to them, eat with them, drink with them, if need be, sleep with them, but have a good time and distill your learnings from it. It is about actually going out there, connecting, and be a part, and ultimately see them as a partner rather than as a customer you deliver. See them as a potential source for co-creation and collaboration and innovation. So we talked a lot about what we learned. We talked about what the drivers are of customer centricity. And on this slide you see for each of those drivers, what are the steps, what is the journey towards becoming an overperformer. And although time didn't permit to go into all of these steps, they're there. And I think the next phase of Insights 2020 is where we will be codifying and developing case studies that describe exactly, so what did LinkedIn do? What did SAB Miller do to go from knowing the data which you have, which already is, by the way, a phenomenal challenge, to linking multiple data sources and to ultimately move up to predictive and forward-looking insights delivery. So that's the next phase. And I think I want to close with basically an invitation. To me, this was not the delivery of the results of Insights 2020. This was more than anything an invitation to join a movement, because that's what I hope this will become. A movement in which we'll, very much in the spirit of collaboration and experimentation, we'll share, we'll network, and of course, yes, we'll publish also outside. The next big wave of quantitative data is already scheduled for the end of this year. And we will tailor that quantitative next wave based on what you ask us to go deeper into. And again, I mean, join us. We have a very phenomenal collaboration, or sorry, a phenomenal coalition. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody can join, as long as there's an authentic, desire to learn and to progress and to become more customer-centric and to deliver on more and on better on customer needs. Thank you very much.